Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the show. And as you can tell, we are joined by a very special guest indeed. You guys may know him best as playing Jason Voorhees himself in Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. We are joined by CJ Graham. CJ, how are you today?
Good, good. Thank you for inviting me into your podcast.
Firstly, I have to tell you, it is such an honor to be able to have you on the show. I'm sure you hear this quite a lot, but for me personally, as well as many people, you are a lot of people's favorite portrayal as Jason Voorhees. And we just want to thank you for sort of the work you've done and for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the support. I appreciate it.
It's incredible. So one of the things I'm sure you hear quite a lot from whether it's interviewers, whether it's fans, or even just on the online general consensus, that across the entire Friday the 13th franchise, so many people see Part 6 as their all-time favorites. How does it feel for you knowing that on such a prestigious franchise, the movie that you played a huge role in is deemed as arguably the greatest of all time?
Well, I'm humbly appreciative. I always say, don't tell Kane Hodder that. Um, but now I was very fortunate. Part 6 was kind of the launching platform to resurrect Jason. No pun intended. Jason Lives, and then take him into the next dimension, so to speak. So I was fortunate also because Part 6 has that cool James Bond opening, and Part 6 has the coming back to life like Frankenstein. Got the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Alice Cooper doing the music, and I get to wear a Batman utility belt as Jason.
That's one of the things I really love about the movie is the opening scene, or the opening sequence of that movie is just so iconic. Um, you know, for you, how did all of that sort of happen? How much of your role was involved in that opening scene?
None of mine. That was Tom McLaughlin, the writer director. That was his
Mhm.
movie. He produced it, or he directed it. He wrote it, and my job when I came in was really just to mesh with Tom, which both of us are old school Universal horror movie fans. So we got the old black and whites. We liked the Frankenstein. We liked, Dracula. We thought all those were great with the werewolf, etc. So for me, it was just an opportunity that was given to me. And sometimes you get lucky. In this case, I got lucky, and 3+ decades later, we're still talking about it.
And that's the thing that kind of blows my mind really is, especially it must be for you to see how many generations of people, from people when the movie sort of first came out to maybe people my generation and then even the younger generation, how this movie is just living through the generations and it's just aging so incredibly.
Well, here's a question, Sam. Were you even born then?
I'll be open. I was born in 1994.
Think about that. So you are a fan of a film that came out before you, and like you said, it's really interesting because I have people that remember sitting with their brother, their sister, their mother, their father, watching Friday the 13th and becoming fans. I did a convention a few weeks ago in Texas, and grandma brought her 4-year-old grandson in to get autographed pictures of Jason. So I mean, it's really a broad spectrum. And when I said earlier, it's humbling that over 3 decades later, we're still talking about this. And for me, I always say it. I got lucky. Sometimes you get lucky and get a job. Then once you get the job, you really got to produce. And I was fortunate that I had a lot of great people around me, and I understood my role, my job, and here we are still talking about it. So it's kind of exciting.
Absolutely. So again, something that I wanted to ask you. So how did you sort of book the role? How did the role sort of come to you originally?
Well, as I indicated, I got lucky. Luck does have a lot to do with life. You can do all you want to plan what your life is going to be like, but I always say you got to have a backup plan and a backup plan to the backup plan. So I had actually went to Los Angeles to look at LAPD as becoming a police officer, and while I was doing that process, I ended up as a general manager of a 15,000 square foot nightclub in LA. Well, that in itself was a great job. However, on Thursdays, I had a hypnotist on stage, and he decided to bring in an outside production company to shoot his show so he could put it into a nice promotional tape to get work, even possibly in Las Vegas as he migrated up his career. The company that came in was called Real Effects, REEL, Real Effects. Just happens they happen to be the company that did all the special effects on part 4 with Ted White, Friday the 13th. And they had made a comment to the hypnotist, why don't we do a scene with Jason Voorhees? We've got Ted White's wardrobe, and we'll take CJ because he's got the size and put him into it. And the rest is history when I say that, because I came through a breakaway screen on stage with the hypnotist, and these folks kept saying they're going to cast me for Jason. I'm like, yeah, right. And a few months later, I got that phone call, and like I said, the rest is history.
Well, I mean, of course, luck has a lot to do with a lot of things going in life, but also I'm a big believer in kind of fate. It almost felt like it was almost meant to be, just everything kind of aligned perfectly at the right time. So that's incredible.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's like luck. Sometimes you get a job. Not the best qualified aren't always the people that get the job. They meet
yeah.
the person that connects with the person doing the interviews better. But at the end of the day, when you do get that job, I always say you need to produce or they'll reduce. In this case, they gave me a job and I just produced everything they asked me to do. And I've done the same thing with my career over the last 25 years running casino resorts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. So obviously, as you mentioned, you kind of got casted at a very spontaneous time in your life. And when you got that phone call, do you remember what you felt or how it was on your very first day on set?
Well, the two questions there. When I first got the call, it really wasn't a big thing to me because it's a B movie. And secondarily, I really didn't go to Los Angeles to become an actor or a stuntman. I really wasn't interested in that direction for any type of career. And the second phase, my first scene that I did on the movie is when I put the wardrobe on. The very first time, I was really excited, a little nervous. But I step under the screen with Jason's profile with the motorhome behind me. I turn, look at the motorhome, and tilt my head and start walking towards it to do some damage. That was my very, very first scene. As you know, movies are shot out of sequence, not just sequentially, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So that was my first scene. The most exciting to me was that. And even today, I'm still a little shocked of the notoriety that comes with being Jason Voorhees. I always tell people if you go to India, which has got about 1.3 billion people, most populated country in the world, show them a picture of Tom Cruise, they'll all say Tom Cruise. Show them a picture of CJ Graham, as I look right now, and they'll shrug their shoulders. However, if you turn that picture over to a picture of Jason Voorhees with a hockey mask, they'll all say Jason. It's kind of anonymous that everybody knows that hockey mask.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, I always remember, uh, so, as far back as I can remember, before I even knew what Friday the 13th the movie was, or even who Jason Voorhees was, I always remember on Halloween seeing people wear that hockey mask. And I always knew that was associated with something, but I could never quite figure out what it was. And it was always until I got a little bit older and they got introduced to Friday the 13th. It is such an iconic sort of look.
Yes, and you'll find that, there used to be the horror industry was horror, but now it's become comic cons, pop culture. All of them have become integrated. In fact, that I just did a show a week ago, and it was a pop culture. You know, uh, we had different people there from different movie sets and different things, and things that people had done. And we had me, one horror guy, but at the same time, the cross behind of people that have become not just horror but pop culture has really grown dramatically. And the shows and conventions, be it in England, Manchester, I did a show, Liverpool, I did a show, was in Sweden earlier this year doing a show,
Wow.
and a couple of years back, I went to Germany. So even the pop culture in the European market has grown significantly.
Yeah, definitely. That's something for me I noticed because I always like to get physical copy media. So I like to buy Blu-rays and DVDs of sort of my favorite movies. It's just something in my head that's, in case, something happens where, companies lose the rights to it, I always have a physical copy I can go back to. And I always remember, to get it imported from America was such a hard sort of process to go through. But over
Right.
the years now, everything just comes over straight away, and it's so easily accessible now. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the key factors is the simplicity of just even watching a movie on your phone.
Mm,
As we do this cast, I'm doing it on my iPhone. The simplicity of doing things and just how it has become just natural to stream films, movies, podcast, interviews, everything via a phone in your hand. So it doesn't take a lot of outstanding technology. It's already in that little package that you hold and walk around with.
absolutely. So going back to playing Jason, for yourself, did you ever watch any of the previous Friday the 13th to maybe get an idea of what the previous actors did, or did you kind of just figure it out on your own?
It was more kind of figured it out on my own. I never went back and watched them, but I had seen bits and parts over the years, but I wasn't really. My horror fan characteristics are going back to Universal. I like the old black and whites. And so when Tom and I met, he was trying to make Jason come back to life like Frankenstein, but he
Mm.
also didn't want Jason to be a zombie, meaning as the movie progressed, Jason started thinking and connecting the dots, being able to think a little more logistically and logically as the film went through. But at the same time, Tom did a great job of adding a little humor to the movie,
Yeah.
so it was cute. Part six only has 2 or 3 swear words and no nudity whatsoever. So it's really one of the only ones you could show a small child, with the exception of the blood. But it's not gory. There's more blood in today's films than there were back then because of the restrictions on the film industry of how much blood and gore you could show.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's why, you've kind of referenced about how you can show smaller children, and it's not, it kind of, when you sit and think back to it, I think that's probably why such a wider scale of fan base love this movie, because it, like you said, there's no nudity, it's not excessively gory at all, really. You just see, blood splatter, but you don't really see any gore like some of the movies now are just horrific. Um, and it does an amazing job of showing comedy without making Jason like the comedy central piece. It's the comedy around him, but yet he's still this, as you mentioned, connecting the dots, but has this subhuman strength. It's so perfectly well put together.
Yeah, I know Tom McLaughlin, who I've had the pleasure of doing a convention here and there with, and panels to our fans. One of the things he talks about is that he wanted to throw a little humor into it. And Frank Mancuso Jr., a key executive at Paramount Studios, said that was fine as long as he didn't make fun of Jason. So I think, did a good job with just a little bit. You got the 2 young men that they dive under that bed, and all of a sudden they say, well, so what'd you want to be when you grew up? I mean, it shows a little bit of a fun to it, but at the same time, Jason's taking care of business in the film. In theory, we killed 18 people.
That's the thing. When you think back to the whole movie, you don't actually think there's that many kills, but actually there was a huge number. That's actually kind of crazy to think about it that way.
Yeah, we actually did 3 more additional kills, went from 15 to 18. When we got back to Los Angeles, and they started doing all the numbers, they realized they had a little bit left in the budget. So Frank told Tom to go back to work and get some more kills. So we went to Griffin Park in Los Angeles and shot the couple on the little motor pad, and the gentleman who said something to the effect of, some people have a strange idea of entertainment, and he got the whiskey bottle in his neck. So those 3 were added at the completion because there was some additional money in the bank.
Oh wow, that's actually, I never knew that. That's awesome. So during the filming process, if you're not sure, it's fine. Do you know if there was anything that you filmed that didn't make the final cut of the movie?
No, I mean, everything we did made the final cut, but there are some scenes where when the heart was pulled out of the chest of, you remember the old actor Horshack, it actually was beating and there was blood popping out of the arteries. Unfortunately, that got cut because it was too gory. Twisting of the neck, they had a nice close up of all the skin stretching as the neck was being taken off. So there are some scenes that were shot. Now, the challenge with that is in the days when we made this, it was really on film. Film was cut and edited and dropped on the floor and then put in the garbage. In today's technology, everything is in the computer. It's always electronic. You can pull out a later date on a Blu-ray. Everything you have, you can go do a director's cut 10 years after. In this case, if we could do a director's cut, there'd be some really good horror that was done with the special effects crew from Real Effects that never made it to the actual movie.
I would love to see that. I hope they release that at some point.
Well, that's the problem though, because in those days they cut and edited that tape, that film on tape went on the floor. You know, everything
Yeah.
today is done electronically and saved. So if you were shooting this with the 35 millimeter, you'd have to go back and edit it, put it together, but you don't save the old tape. And after time, old tape does dissolve. So again, it all ended up in the garbage. And here we are wishing we had that now to do a director's edition to put it out.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those things, again, back in the day, it's just the evolution of time. You know, those things are going to happen. But then also saying that there's this feeling of, I think kind of that's why a lot of people now are definitely going back to watching old horror movies, because there's something about the way it's filmed and the way it is put together that you just don't get in these movies. And some movies now, I do think you see too much behind the scenes, so it takes that kind of mystique away from the movie. Um, but you know, it's just, you know, it's all wishing and hoping we could have had it, but it's maybe it was never meant to be.
Well, that's a true statement because today's films, I think people like the originality of the Friday the 13th and the Michael Myers and the simplicity of a person putting on a mask or a hood and creating heinous murders. Now, today, example, I love Fast and Furious, think it's a great franchise.
Mhm.
However, I mean, how many times can you jump out of a plane, land on a tank, pick up a 50 cal, do a backflip, and start burning up somebody with the 50 cal machine gun? It's non-realistic. You go back to the 80s horror, 90s horror, you will see where you just kind of go, wow, that's feasible. I can see opening up my window and Jason's standing there, or somebody by the woods that looks like they're getting ready in a clown outfit to kill somebody. They don't need all the special effects, the green screens, and the computers to add to the scariness of a good old fashioned scary movie.
I could have put that better myself. That's put to perfection. Um, so for you, did you ever watch any of the Friday the 13th after part six?
I did, as a matter of fact. I watched the 3D with Richard. Richard passed away several years back, and we were doing a documentary to Richard. And I had seen Richard a few times at a convention here and there. So I wanted to go back and watch his film to make sure I knew what I was speaking of when I was doing the interviews for his documentary. I've only seen parts of part one, and Ari was. I love Ari. He was in it for maybe 8, 9 seconds, and he's made a career of it. He's out there doing
Yeah.
conventions. He's got a band. He plays music at the conventions. He's traveling with his band. He's traveling doing conventions. And anytime he's in a town where there's a horror convention or Comic Con or pop culture, he'll call and say he's in town, shows up. They give a table. He goes to work selling a couple of the photos of him coming out of the water after Adrian King and trying to drown her.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of respect the hustle. I respect that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I've seen that. And then I watched part seven. Originally, I was slotted to do part seven. So I always had a
Oh,
kind of
wow.
an interest in that. At Laura Park and Kane, I thought they did a marvelous job. And I really liked the twist of Laura having this psychiatric ability. And then after that, I never really saw the completion of each one of them. But I think there was some lost in the shuffling, so to speak, and the franchises, got a little bumpy over the last couple of years. I'm hoping that when Mr. Miller and Mr. Cunningham come to some type of agreement to put part 13 out will be a relaunch, I'm hoping. Tom McLaughlin, the writer director of part 6, has rewritten a new script, Jason Never Dies, and he'd love to be able to do part 13 because part 6 was kind of a launching platform to get it back after part 5. And
Hmm.
so I think he has the skill set in Jason Never Dies to bring it back and give it a opportunity to go forward with multiple features after that that are more connected. I think we've learned a lot since 1986 and beyond, where a good example is Harry Potter. You know, they put the movie together sequentially like a book. So chapter to chapter to chapter, it has connectivity going all the way back to chapter 1. And I'm hoping that when they do part 13, 14, 15, and 16, we'll all have some information where you kind of get the connectivity and you can watch part 15 and go, oh, I remember that connectivity within part 13, rather than being all discombobulated and all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. I've been hearing. I mean, I've had the pleasure. I think I've been able to interview. I think you might be my seventh guest from the franchise, and every person ends up saying at some point that we're really hoping that the two sort of owners of the rights for each equivalent part sort of come to an agreement, and that we can really heavily relaunch the franchise back, but not just do it in a one-off hit sort of movie, but do it so there could be subsequent roles after. And I mean, I had the honor of being able to interview Tom McLaughlin, um, and there is no one better that would be in the capable hands of than Tom, because he is just so passionate about the franchise.
Huge, very true. And I think if I was in charge, I'm not, but running casino resorts, I had $1 billion resort and some 2,300 employees, give or take. So I have a business sense about me. But if I had the opportunity to engage, my personal opinion was I'd pick 3 different directors. I'd make sure that the first director of part 13, the second, third director have to be partially connected, and that part 13 has to set up for part 14. I would also use the same Jason in all 3, and at the same time, I would shoot them sequentially in order so that within a 6-month window, you've got 3 of them shot and on the shelf for distribution. The reason I use the 3 same Jasons, because if you're going to shoot for 6 months, great. You can change directors and scripts along the way for each one, but release the first one, 18 months later, release the second one, then the third one. Basically, in a nutshell, you've got about a 5-year window covered before you figure out what to do next with the franchise.
Fantastic. If the role ever, let's say for a dispute's sake that it kind of got announced that there would be a brand new Friday the 13th, could we potentially see CJ Graham returning as Jason Voorhees?
It's a loaded question. I'm the same
I
physical
know.
structure. I'm 6'3", 250. I do wardrobe photo ops with the fans, and everybody comes around the corner and just stops in their tracks because it's the same physical structure standing in front of them. Nothing's changed. Now, to answer your question, 2 things. If I felt I could deliver as good or better than part 6 as Jason, I would entertain the option. I don't want to be the person that came back as a has been and wrecked the character. Second side of that is I don't want to go to space. I don't want to go to Mars. I want to do something that goes back to the roots of what Jason has become, and participate. I just don't want to do it to say I did it.
Yeah.
I want to do it to contribute to the franchise in a valuable way, as I hope we did in part 6.
Yeah, that's and this is, to me, this is what I think. I know obviously there's going to be I think 95% of the viewers of this podcast are going to be Friday the 13th fans. And being someone that's a part of the community, and listening to what the fans say, this is exactly what all the fans sort of want to be hearing. They want to hear people that really care about it and don't just want to create, a quick, with some people, to make a quick buck, to really promote the franchise, make huge heaps of money, leave and not really care about it. We want something that is going to be a bit more longevity. So I know the fans would love to hear this.
Yeah, in my opinion, is again, if I could do all the physical characteristics. When I was younger, when you hit the ground, you tuck and roll. Now that I'm a little older, when I hit the ground, I go thump. So I'd have to make sure that I can produce some
Yeah.
stunts. Going through walls and windows, that doesn't phase me. I'm not as cocky as I used to be 30 years ago. Breathing off a regular 20 feet underwater with a chain around my neck, chained to the bottom. I don't know if I've got the kahunas to do that, because you're a little more different. Life has changed a little bit. But if there were enough stunts that I could be involved in, you can always. There's no disrespect in having a real stunt man. I did all my own stunts, but at the same time, if there was one or two I couldn't do, I'm not. I have no problem with having somebody come in to make sure the stunt is effective and
Mhm.
it honors part 13. But I would like to do, if not all of them, most of them. And secondarily, like I said, if I can't do as well or better in part 6, which physically, again, I'm 6'3", 250. I'm the same structure. This got a little silver on it, but nobody cares about my ugly face. They want the hockey mask.
The hockey mask is a must. That's the one thing we can agree
Exactly.
on, is the must.
Look at this good
Actually,
looking guy behind me.
I love your background, by the way. I think that's awesome.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you look to my right, I believe your left, those are cards from the Palms Casino Resort, where I used to be a vice president many years
Oh,
ago. And my left, your right,
mhm.
lo and behold, if you ever put CJ Graham in Chippendales in Google, you'll find out I was with Chippendales back in about 87
Oh,
in
the
Culver
Chippendales.
City. Yeah, back in Los Angeles. And of course, center mass behind me, good old Jason.
That's awesome. Funnily, you bring up the underwater scene, which is a hugely iconic scene in part 6. How was all of that filming? How was that filmed, and what did you sort of have to go through to get those shots?
Well, we did the shooting in Los Angeles, UCLA or USC dive pool, which is 20 feet deep for high dives. What they did is they put a black tarp all the way around it because we're shooting at night. They didn't want anything to be just solid black. They put me in wardrobe. They took me to the bottom of the pool. They put 2 center blocks down there so they could always take me to the same spot. They put a real chain around my neck, and I just stood on the center blocks. I would signal for air. Divers would come in and just shove a regulator in my mouth and clear it because I can't see anything. It's pitch black and I only have one eye anyway. So really there's nothing to see. It's all hand and feel. And then every 15, 20 minutes, they take me to the surface and I put my arms up on top of the surface and look at a little TV monitor to see what we were doing and any corrections. So we ended up being underwater most of the evening until there was a point where even the safety divers were so cold that they wanted to get out too. So I mean, I was numb by then. I didn't have a suit on, a wetsuit. But at that point, once your body temperature goes down to a point, you don't want to get in and out. It's the worst thing you
Mhm.
can do. You have to remember, 49 years ago, I was in the military. So some things I learned when it came to,
Oh,
how your body temperature goes up and down and how to protect it from going
yeah.
up and then down too fast, which would make you have some health issues.
Yeah, obviously I know, in the grand scheme of things, you would have been, very looked after and monitored. But was there ever moments when you were filming that you were thinking maybe this is a little too much?
I wish I could say that. Now, at this age, I might say, that's why I said earlier, I got to make sure I can do it. But when you're 27, 26, you've only been out of the military a couple of years, you really think you're a badass. Ain't nothing going to stop you. I can go through, set me on fire. I can do this, but you're not a stuntman. I got this. Set me on fire. Going through walls and doors, and it just, your athletic capabilities are high, your physical
Mhm.
capabilities are high, and your lack of common sense doesn't exist. So let's do it.
Did you ever suffer any injuries whilst filming on Friday the 13th?
No, not anything to speak of. I mean, I was bruised up on the rib cage a few times from
Mhm.
jumping in the boat, bringing when I was
Oh,
on
yeah.
fire, and that I jump up and come down the edge of the boat. But other than that, I was fortunate. I walked away with a few bruises, and that's about it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Because I hate, there's always this thing when I've interviewed Ken Kersinger and Brad Lurie as well, who have also been stuntmen in, Ken Kersinger was in Friday the 13th, played Jason Voorhees, and Brad Lurie was Michael Myers. And they've both, some of the injury stories they've told me are just so like horrific. You think you'd go through all of that. How can I enjoy this movie now, knowing how much you've gone through?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's luck, and I was fortunate that I didn't twist an ankle. I was going through the window, that nothing, even though it's a breakaway window, you still got to worry
Mhm,
about something happening.
of course.
So I got lucky. I did my job, and I'm hoping everybody was satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, in not necessarily in the water scene, but in general, sort of when you're wearing a mask on a day-to-day basis, what was your kind of visibility like?
Oh, it was none. You have one eye. I always tell people, if you want to just take your finger like this and put it over your eye and close the other eye, that's all you can see. You can't see your feet when you're walking. You can't see your hands until they're almost 2 feet in front of you. So you've got a straight peripheral vision, straight forward. But again, when you're walking, you can't see your feet at all. You can barely see 10 feet in front of you. So everything is kind of feely. It's like being just coming out of the military a few years before. I still walk even today like a soldier, 30 inches all around. And you got to make sure you plant each one of your feet before you put full force on it, because you couldn't see where your foot was going.
That's that's insane. And then to think that you had to perform a lot of the stunts with such a lack of visibility. I can imagine just for yourself those challenges you must have had at the time.
Well, like I said, when you're young, you just, hey, I'm invisible. Nobody can see me. Nobody can touch me. I'm a BA, badass. And like I said, you have no common sense when you're young. It's like
Right.
ridiculous. Your fear is completely different. I don't know if you want to call it just being cocky or young, or just have never experienced injury. Because once you get hurt doing something, you become very conscientious about your shoulders, from lifting weights, or your knee because you blew it out. And then after
Yeah.
that, you always have a little bit of a psychological warfare that you've got an injury that you got to baby, and you may not have to baby it. Psychologically, it's beat you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, whilst you were playing Jason, um, did Tom allow you to have a lot of freedom to do the things you wanted to do, or was he very strict and he wants Jason to walk or act or be a certain way?
Tom was very liberal with me about the Jason character. He never even really gave me much guidance on it. And again, I was fortunate. As soon as I started walking on set, I was able to deliver what he'd already envisioned in his mind. So he always told me, just stand up strong, look like you can go through the middle of a wall without anything stopping you, like Superman. But at the same time, you got to be cool when you're doing everything, so you don't look too animated. But he also would say, don't want you to look like a robot. He doesn't want Days of the Dead and all this. He wants, so it was kind of a connection of all features. And again, I was lucky. We did a good job, I think.
Yeah, you did an absolutely phenomenal job. Um, sort of the last question I wanted to ask you around the franchise, it's like I ask all the guests. Once sort of you had your post-production stages, it was all finished, and then the movie was released to the public for the first time. Do you remember the general feeling around Friday the 13th being released and sort of the energy that there was at the time?
No. And the reason I say that is not go to the release of the film.
Oh
They
wow.
had a release in LA. And of course, I was invited, but I was already back to work,
Mm,
running clubs. And I was working, I was committed
yeah.
to the owner. And so I did not get the opportunity to go to the actual film where they actually came in for the first time, and you got to sit in the audience as a cast member and listen. Now, remember, it's still a B movie back then. And secondarily,
Of
the
course.
best, the top movie of 1986 was Top Gun. So, B movies didn't have what they are today, which they become a common, and everybody likes the horror, Halloween's, Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger's, Leatherface. Those are all extremely popular. And now we'll
Mhm.
see if we're fortunate enough to be here 3, 4 decades later. This is great. Now we got a few new ones out there. Terrifier, it's been around now for a couple of years. We'll see. Who knows? In 10 years, it may be going. It may still be going in 20 years. Time will tell. But we've been very fortunate with, I call it the Four Musketeers, which is, Freddy, Leatherface, Michael Myers, and Jason. So very fortunate that up to, Halloween came out in 1978. And if I'm not mistaken, Leatherface in 74. And then
74, yeah.
we had Friday the 13th, and here we are, 3, 4 decades later, still talking about it.
It's insane. Like I can imagine around those times, especially Leatherface, 1974, and you know, no one would have ever thought that in 2023 people would still be raving and talking about those exact movies. Not even just the franchise, that exact movie. People are still raving about them today.
Yep. And so that's why I consider it a big honor. I'm very humble about it. I wouldn't be here without the fans. Their love for the content of the movie and the
Mhm.
actors and actresses that are all involved in the film. Uh, in fact, this coming up week, Tom McLaughlin is having a premiere showing Friday the 13th in LA at a theater, and it's going to be a 35 millimeter film from back in 1986, and he's going to have himself and 4 or 5 other cast members there answering questions for the fans, and it's sold out.
I mean, what an opportunity for the fans, though. Fans of the franchise. That's an incredible opportunity.
Yes.
Um, so, something actually, speaking of fans, I really wanted to just very quickly cover the convention scene. I know you're quite active with the Comic Cons and conventions. Um, in a general sense, how was your experience been meeting all the fans of your work?
It's been an honor. You again, like I indicated earlier, I had a young man come up, 4 years old, and I have people 70 years old, and I have everybody in between. And the nice part is a lot of the fans remember something about a parent or a brother or sister where they snuck into the room to watch it. And they have memories with that family member. In some cases, the mother and father have passed away, but that nice memory that they sat with mom and watched Friday the 13th,
Mhm.
sometimes just once, but sometimes multiple times. And they get to meet Jason. It's like, it kind of brings back a family memory for them. So, with that being said, again, I wouldn't be here without the fans. I'm very humble about it. I make sure that every time I meet a fan, it's an experience. I just don't sign an autograph and give them a photo and do a selfie. I engage in some conversation to see what they do, who they are, what they're into, what they're really enjoying about life. And you'd be surprised how young people, teenagers, will listen to me before they'll listen to their parent when it comes to maintaining good grades or being careful, and are you allowed to do social media before we take a selfie, because I don't want to get you in trouble if you're on restriction from social media. So again, it's an honor. Wouldn't be here without the fans, wouldn't be here without you, your interest, and your members, the interest of what they have with the film.
You know, it's again for. I mean, obviously, I know you echo, about how the fans have put you there, but also for us, for me, I have memories with, especially my mum. I used to watch all the old classic horror movies with my mum, um, and she's the one that really got me into horror. Uh, and again, to have the opportunity to be able to sit here and talk to you, that to me, that's like one of the biggest honors that I personally have. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Now, I appreciate it, and thank all the fans out there for listening to us. And I do appreciate y'all. Look forward to meeting you when I come to England next time, or
Yes.
possibly to the European front. Like I said, Germany is probably coming up, not this year, but next year again. We'll go over there. I understand Amsterdam, Holland has a good show that I've been invited to look at for next year. So we'll see what happens. But again, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me part of your life today.